Hey, Pretentious Engineer here. I know you didn't ask, but it's time for your weekly one-on-one, and I want to talk about moving beyond culture shock, trauma, and doubt as you may step into global leadership. For those of you who don't know, I've been engineering for Johnson & Johnson for about a decade in a wide variety of capacities, and I've wanted to start capturing some of my journey and writing. So this is coming from a blog, but I'm also turning it into videos and podcasts so that you can glean a little bit from my life of pain and struggle, and hopefully it'll give you a faster step forward. So today's posting, again, is moving beyond culture shock, trauma, and doubt as a global leader. And I'm excited to continue to navigate some of your most challenging questions. So if this video is helpful or this podcast is helpful, depending on how you're experiencing the content, let me know in the comments what you want me to write about or talk about next, because I kind of am an open book. All right, so let's jump in. So today, I'd like to offer a reflection on fatherhood. I've always wanted to be a present father, and I grew up in a relatively stable home with blue-collar parents who worked hard to provide financially while also being present with us. I remember my father working challenging hours as a plant manager at a Japanese ink company, and some of my most celebrated times with him would be on Saturday mornings, when he would go to the plant and do extra batches of ink. I would often wake up early and go to work with him. I'd pack up my PS1 and Crash Bandicoot in a backpack, and he would set me up on a small tube TV. He'd give me a couple quarters to buy snacks from a vending machine, and I'd be set for the next 5 hours. While he was making ink and providing for the family, I enjoyed special time away from home playing some of my favorite games. He would sneak me around the office when the lights were off so I could see all the cubicles and all the manufacturing equipment, and for me, this was a magical time as I experienced a piece of my dad's world. But for him, he probably felt the tension of being present as a father while still meeting the needs of his job. 22 years later, I'm now a global leader within Johnson & Johnson based in Japan, navigating the same tension. I continue to wonder if I'm present enough with my children while also meeting the demands of my role. As a father, I want my kids to feel like they can be part of my world, or better yet, that I'm rooted in theirs. Today, I want to provide you the space to process the same tension in your own life and discover how it can be influenced by the trauma of your past. Excuse me. In the last 3 years, I've experienced more panic attacks, anxiety, uncertainty, and depression than I have in the last 31 years. At the same time, I've been entrusted with more influence, resources, and responsibilities than ever before. So while externally I emote vision, confidence, and the calming presence of a global leader, internally I war with imposter syndrome, apathy, and fear of failure. If we pause for a moment, I would anticipate that many of you may have felt, oh shoot, how do I read my own words? If we pause for a moment, I would anticipate that many of you have felt the same in a given season of life. A pressure to emote an external self that is dissident with your internal self. A global relocation, like from the US to Japan, only amplifies this dissidence. My family's journey to Japan was wrought with suffering and unimaginable complexity. In the course of 1 year, we relocated 12 times with 3 children, which included a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a newborn, which actually grew up in a closet. It's very complicated. It's like Harry Potter style. So here's the speed version of the unimaginable. In February of 2020, I was interviewing for the front-end innovation lead Japan role, which is a mouthful. My job would be to connect with Japanese clinicians, understand their unmet needs, and then advance meaningful product innovation on their behalf. Well, in March 2020, there was a small bump in the road called COVID, which delayed this role by about a year and a half. And then in April of 2021, I was reoffered the role and told that we would be able to relocate quickly, as we thought Japan would open for the Olympics during the summer. This was a false assumption, but because the housing market was promising, we sold our home and J&J provided us temporary furnishing in a Cincinnati 2-bedroom apartment. This apartment had a massive bedbug infestation, which caused us to move to a hotel, Chicago with family, back into the hotel, and then back into the original unit after 2 rounds of extermination. During the months of living out of our suitcases, the trauma experienced by our family only grew, and we never really felt rooted or safe in any of the housing after that. Finally, in November 2021, we were told that we would get an emergency medical visa and be able to enter Japan. So we moved out of our Cincinnati apartment, went to Chicago to say goodbye to family for Thanksgiving. And the day before we received our visa, Japan closed the borders again due to the Delta variant. We were then displaced in Chicago for 5 months, living with family in a hotel and a furnished apartment. During all these transitions, schooling for our kids was totally disrupted. We had said hello and goodbye so many times to so many friends and family members, and it was just awful across the board. And it was in March 2022 that we finally immigrated to Japan, first living in a furnished apartment in Omotesando, which was awesome, before settling in a home in Tokyo. And then after a year of waiting, all of our furniture and possessions that were packed when we sold our home finally arrived in Japan via sea shipment. So like went over the ocean. It was awesome. So why do I share this long-winded story of uncertainty, fear, suffering, and victory? Well, because because after over 2 years later, the trauma of our family's relocation still deeply impacts me at home and in the workplace. I'm a different person because of all of this global shenanigans. A few months ago, there were serious layoffs at US R&D. So actually, this is about a year ago now. 9 months or so? I wrote this a while back. But we're turning it into videos because it's still good stuff. All right, so about 9.5 months ago, there were a series of layoffs of US R&D. Many of my friends, colleagues, and mentors were impacted. And I was privileged that many key leaders, both from the Japan and US R&D organization, advocated for me. And because of that, my role was preserved. Yet the trauma of my past still triggered me to work out of a fear of displacement. It was honestly terrifying to consider losing my job after all these displacements and being forced to relocate after barely laying roots in Japan. I started to wrestle with these thoughts like, I can't put my children through another international relocation and another disruption in their schooling, friends, etc. Meanwhile, organizational volatility in R&D impacted the probability of success of innovation from Japan. So I found myself overworking to control my fate, while at the same time unable to work because of these apathetic feelings lurking under the surface about things that were completely out of my control. And across all of this, there was a constant pressure to put on the mask of vision, confidence, and a calming leadership presence. At home, I struggled to be present as a father, as I felt the pressure to provide stability in Japan. I misread that. At home, I struggled to be present. At home, I struggled to be a present father, as I feel the pressure to provide stability in Japan. And I do things for my kids, but am I really present with my kids when we spend time together? As I worked across time zones, my mind was torn across worlds, and I lost presence in all spaces. It was challenging from this job that I never really appreciated, and it was a huge impact on the dynamics of our family. I never fully anticipated. I never appreciated any of the late nights and struggle. Also, I wrote this in present tense, and I'm trying to read it in past, which is why you see me kind of struggling a little bit, but happy to share. All right. So, over the years, I've developed great coping mechanisms to navigate these external challenges. Yet, one of the hardest to embody is honesty. Honesty with myself as I'm struggling. Honesty with my wife and children when I'm struggling. Honesty with my management, senior leadership, and the teams that I lead when I'm struggling. It takes vulnerability and honesty to bring our whole selves to work. Yet when we're navigating a trauma response, this can be incredibly difficult. Recently, my expense report became so delinquent that my company card was temporarily suspended, leading to a legitimate panic attack. I felt like there was no way to help my manager understand why something so simple was now so complex in a different cultural language context. Despite my insecurities, I expressed the pressures I had been navigating and how so many expectations continued to slip basic tasks like expenses, email, etc., into my backlog. What started as a conversation of my failure to meet compliance expectations transformed into a moment of authentic vulnerability. That day marked a noticeable shift in how my manager started to circle around the problems I was facing. In many ways, I started to feel like he was in my corner. After almost 2 years in Japan, I'm starting to find my way as an innovator, global leader, and most importantly, as a father. I'm learning how to be honest and open about what my limitations are and setting healthy boundaries so I can be fully present, whether I'm at home or at work. I'm working less, living more. Kinda. Things have shifted. We have a baby due in a couple of weeks, so it's crazy again in a different way. So, here we go. As I prepare for the arrival of baby number 4, I'm also preparing for parental leave as well, which is in like 4 weeks. So, working across global boundaries and mixed business priorities can crush a leader if healthy rhythms of life aren't established. This is amplified if you're also leading from a position of culture shock, trauma, and doubt in your own abilities through something like imposter syndrome. So, let me provide you with a moment of reflection, a moment to be honest with yourself. What pressures from work are impacting who you are at home? How can you overcome your fear of being perceived as weak if you share your struggles authentically with family and colleagues? Honesty with our coworkers and leadership, while uncomfortable, is a superpower. It makes us real to one another. It builds trust. It makes you stronger when you reveal your greatest struggles. But give yourself grace, as honesty is a muscle that has grown over time. And as a final note, get the help you need. I know there are many stigmas around mental health, but you really need someone trained in these spaces to be your guide on the side. There's much you need to process before you can build the courage to share pieces of your trauma. That's why I write. It is how I process these things. And also, that's why I create content on TikTok and YouTube. It's a piece of it as a response. It's also the responsibility of leaders to recognize trauma in members of their team and create space to accommodate them as needed. This responsibility is not possible if these leaders don't first process their own trauma and heal. You have to know yourself before you can know those you lead. Last month, I shared a magic moment with my son. The entire J&J Japan team set up a family day for employees to bring their kids to work. And in the morning, my son packed his backpack with his Nintendo Switch, and we rode the train together to the main office. On every floor, different J&J operating companies created medtech experiences for kids. My son dressed up like a surgeon, performed laparoscopic surgery, and explored a wide range of surgical technologies. He experienced the same joyful spark I did when I would go with my father to work. So I want to read you a brief thank you note I wrote to the Japan team who hosted the event, because I think it captures how meaningful that moment was both to me and my son. So here we go. I want to take a moment to thank everyone for organizing and executing Family Day. The experience was deeply moving for both me and my son Hezekiah, and I'd like to share why. Before Hezekiah was born, I used to spend very late nights in the lab working on robotic software for the Otava system, which is like our multi-armed robot for Johnson & Johnson. But once he arrived, the integration of work and family changed as I found purpose as both a global innovator and a father. Sometimes I would still have late nights in the lab, but Hezekiah would join me in his stroller. I'd feed him his favorite snacks while I was debugging code, and the Cincinnati campus was very casual, so I'd often bring him to work with me and show him the wonders of Ethicon. Well, for the last year and a half, he's asked me if he could visit J&J headquarters to meet my friends, because I refer to my coworkers as friends when I talk with my kids. He had a genuine desire to know you and to see how our work helps people around the world. Family Day was so special for Hezekiah, and you all did an amazing job creating fun, enriching experiences for him and all the other kids and families there. Just as I can struggle to find my place within Japan, so does my son. Thank you for giving him a moment to pretend he was a surgeon, as it helped us both feel like we belong. So my hope in writing this blog, and also for reading these in video podcast kind of form, is that it may give you a sense of belonging as you navigate life's various contexts. So to all the fathers, mothers, aspiring future parents, We normally talk about patients at Change. I mean, eventually, maybe you might be a patient. All the aspiring parents, know that you are enough, both within your work context and the families you serve. Be present wherever life leads you, and as always, keep changing the world. The Pretentious Engineer. So, friends, I hope you enjoyed this little talk. I'm going to try to do more of these. It takes a lot of effort to write these and record these, but my hope is that as I kind of share my experiences with you, it will prompt something in your own unique journey. And if you engage the comments and let me know what questions you have for an engineer with a decade of industry experience and raising 3 going on 4 kids in Japan, just let me know, because I'm happy to write on any topics as long as it's a mutual blessing to you. So with that, keep changing the world.